This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended to replace professional medical advice. The views expressed in this podcast may not reflect the views of the Village Network. If you are struggling with mental health, please see our show notes for a list of resources.
I'm glowing because we got to talk to Patrick Hines today. Patrick Hines is the co-host and producer of True Crime Obsessed, which is one of my all-time favorite podcasts. It is this really unique blend of true crime and comedy, which you think would not mix, but the way they do it is perfect. They somehow manage to both make fun of like documentary tropes while also being super respectful of victims and the events and putting a lot of advocacy into their work. And Patrick, as you know, also wrote what is like one of our new favorite books, Failure is Not an Option. What did you think of this one?
Oh my God, I loved it. We're passing it around the office. It's on its third person, the copy. I laughed out loud. It resonated a lot with me as someone who, went through some of the same childhood experiences. And when he talks about this CNBC moment of wearing the jacket and looking into the camera in slow motion, like I literally spit out a drink. Jonathan's like, "What are you reading?" A great book. It was a great read. It made me feel really good about him and his story. And Daisy, how he got Daisy.
I know. I think that there is like a reason why mental health professionals love this book. It's like, it just kind of makes you look back at moments that most of us think of as like trauma and like things like, this is not something that I want to think about too often, but Patrick does it, and he does it with honesty, and he does it with humor. And it's like, oh, you kind of start to realize as you read this, like even though it's a very funny book, you can read it as a very lighthearted book, there's this much deeper message of resilience in it.
Yes. Yeah. I think just also the dating part, although we're not going to really dive into that in the episode, just his rawness about the things that said in the dating community and how mean people can be on dates, and
Well, that was new to me because like obviously you exist in the gay community. I don't. Like, did that resonate with you? His experiences of dating?
Yeah, I mean, luckily I've been out of that now for 7 years. But when I was dating, and I can't make fun of the apps because that's how I met my husband. Mm-hmm. But, we dated and talked for a year. And I just think there were some really cruel people out there. And much like Patrick, I was ready to give it all up. And then, Jonathan ended up working with me. But I just think that the community can be really mean. And I think that's one of the things that, I hope that people could take from his book is, he owns who he is. And I think that part is just really missing in society, that people are just not giving themselves the grace to be who they are, but also we have to watch what we're saying to people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So it was deep. I felt it from a standpoint going through that journey. So maybe that's why the book resonated with me, but he made fun of it in a way that I could see. Plus, who would have thought that B. Arthur would have been so mean to him?
Oh my gosh. The B. Arthur guys, buy the book just for B. Arthur.
Oh my gosh. The B. Arthur story.
So funny.
And then she calls him the wrong name. Would she call him Peter? I think she calls him the wrong name.
She calls him the wrong name for like years, like until she meets him years later. It's so funny.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, like I had a thought and then I completely lost it. I wanted to just kind of share how genuine he was in his interactions with us and his team's interactions with us, because this podcast was just a little bitty idea in the back of our heads, we thought, who could we invite on to talk about some of the themes here at the Village? And Patrick jumped to mind because I'm such a fan of his and Jillian's. And I just reached out via the contact page on his website and thought, 50-50 chance I even get a reply. And surely he's not going to want to, be on a podcast of some random fan that hasn't even started yet. Like, we didn't even have a website yet. Steve, his husband, got back to me within 24 hours and said, "Hey, thanks so much for being a fan of TCO. Of course, Patrick would love to talk to you." And their team has just been amazing ever since. And I just... I really saw that as like, he's like walking the walk. Like, he has gone through all of these trials to get to where he is. And he's looking back and he's saying, how can I help other people? And I thought that was really cool.
He's just another human trying to make it in the world and helping others. I think, to your point, I did not even know his name until you shared this. And now when I read his book on vacation and laughed and really bonded with it, like, thank you for taking me on this journey. You've introduced me to someone new that I now look up to as a just huge advocate for the community and kids and fostering. Like,
Yeah,
thank
and
you for-
definitely not a cult leader.
No,
We went to the live show, and I
Yes.
was talking to strangers because, when you're fans, you bond with other fans. And Matthew's like, oh my gosh, this is a cult, isn't it? I was like, kind of, but not in a bad way.
So we may be susceptible
Yes.
to cult, but so we'll stay away. But his show was amazing. I don't know if he's still on tour, but if you have a chance to see him, like, I just felt like that was just such a great book tour.
So worth it. Yeah. And Clint, what did you think? I mean, this was your first time kind of interacting with Patrick.
Yeah, I mean, he was super nice, and I loved his story, and really just I was appreciative of his vulnerability about the foster care system. I think for an organization like the Village Network, it's great to be able to glean some things from how New York does things and things like that. But just that he was transparent about what their experience was like, what new foster parents could maybe do in the situation if they're thinking about fostering or starting, and just how organizations can help those who are coming into fostering, because there is a big need. And I think a lot of people are scared of making that jump, or just there's a big mystery there. And so I think that his story is one of those that could be really encouraging to people.
Absolutely. And
to
I
get
think
involved.
also, like, there's a sort of misconception, and maybe I say this as coming from the perspective of a woman, and women are taught to be selfless, right? That if you become a foster parent, you need to embrace all of the kids, and you need to sacrifice all of who you are and what you do to, engage in this extremely meaningful work. And I love the way that Patrick tells this story, because he and his partner Steve, and his husband Steve, made a commitment to change one life. And that makes all the difference. And so, like, for people who are considering fostering, it's another perspective of you can change one life, and that really matters. That matters to that one person. That matters to everyone that person interacts with going forward. So it's something that you can, or I think a lot of people could integrate into their lives in a way that works for whatever else they have going on with their families and careers.
Yeah, I think they're a really good example of the ripple effect, in that, you're not going to know what changing Daisy's life really means. I mean, you can see it now, obviously. She's got a great home. She's got great parents. But that is going to, for lack of a better term, pay dividends 15, 20. Daisy's trajectory and what sort of family she's going to create is changed forever because of Patrick and Steve. And so I think that needs to be an encouragement to people that doing something is better than not doing anything. Mm-hmm. And that may not be fostering. It may be helping an organization like the Village or other fostering networks have the funding or have resources that they need in order to make so that people can do those sorts of things.
Absolutely. And one thing that I share a lot about for people who are kind of dabbling into the idea of fostering is that the Village, and I know plenty of other organizations do this as well, like to offer respite care providers for their foster families. So if fostering is something you're considering, you can go through the foster training and become a respite provider so that foster families can go out to dinner for a night, that they can go to a family reunion or take a small trip out of state, and that child is still cared for in a safe, informed environment.
Yeah. And I think, to the ripple effect piece, it does take a village, and getting the village that can watch the child when you need a night out and need a break, because parenting's hard. I watch you do it. I watch you do it. It's not easy work. And so that ripple effect that we're creating, but also giving you the time to decompress and have a minute away. Luckily you both have strong family support systems, but if you don't, we have a community that can help with that. But I think that ripple effect, our CEO, Rich, talks about that all the time. Like the ripple effect, we can't quantify that, because it's just so powerful. When I think about Daisy having her older sister in school, like, how cool is that?
That is so amazing.
Oh.
I love that she's able to have that connection.
Yeah.
And her family is so much bigger than most families in many ways. Yeah. And I think that's really cool.
Well, and I think about, just the rawness that Patrick, obviously Steve seems more reserved. Patrick, is so raw and truthful and owns and leans into what what the things we may not like about ourselves or the things that we wish we could change. He owns them and has made them beautiful. And I think he's going to make a woman who's going to be very strong in this world because of that. I just love that. It was so powerful.
Yeah. So Clint, are you a Daddy Steve or a Daddy Patrick? Are you the one they're going to go to?
I might be both.
You might be both.
I mean,
I don't know.
I'm probably more of a Steve. I feel like I have to keep my daughter in line.
I'm for sure the daddy Patrick.
Well, I think it's gonna.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you're the
I'm the pushover.
It's gonna depend on the child too. Like Mabel can get whatever she wants from me because she's pretty chill. But Sloan, she's a strong, independent girl, so she can hold her own. But
say my favorite thing she says.
My do itself.
My do itself. Oh, I love that. Does she still say that, or is she grown out of that?
No, she's pretty much grown out of that. But yeah, I think we've given everybody some wonderful little nuggets about what they're going to hear in the episode. So let's get into the interview with Patrick.
Oh my gosh, we're so excited. So I'm just going to kick off by saying that the reason we got Patrick here today is because I'm an enormous fan of the podcast that he co-hosts with Jillian Pensavalle called True Crime Obsessed. My best friend recommended it to me, probably about 5 or 6 years ago, and I'm on the Patreon. Like, I listen to every episode. It's part of my life. It got me through being a new mom. Like,
thank you for saying that. That is so nice. That is I was just saying that Jillian and I, we sit in the studio that I'm currently sitting in, and we just like scream at each other about true crime for a couple hours a week. And we just like sometimes forget that anyone hears it or that it goes out anywhere. So, thank you for saying those nice things. Now I feel bashful.
Oh no, absolutely. And like lately, I've been with you and your jealousy of Jillian's child-free life. Cause I just told you I have a 5-year-old. Every now and then I'm like, she made a really, really good choice.
Listen, every time her and her husband might go on a vacation and they talk about they get to go to the adult all-inclusive where there's no kids running around. I'm like, you know what, girl? No notes. Nope. I love my kid, but no notes.
Why aren't you jealous of us?
I am very jealous of you. Yeah, Matthew and Jonathan are also child-free by choice, and they live this very luxurious and wonderful life. So.
I mean, I keep saying to myself, I love my kid, and every day I have at least one pang of oh my God, I love being her dad. But at least once a day, I'm like, what would my sliding doors life be? Where you know what I mean? Where it's it's a Tuesday night at 9:00 and I feel like going to one of the gay bars in Hell's Kitchen, and you know what? I'm just gonna go do it.
Right?
Yeah. And what would your hair look like in your sliding door life? These are great questions.
My hair is luxurious. It's long and thick and with a slight European curl to it.
Oh, I love that.
Oh, like the cover of all of those romance novels. Yes. You'd be riding a horse.
Yes, exactly.
So we wanted to talk to you because part of our work at the Village Network is running a foster care system. And Matthew and I were both so struck by your candid talk about what it was like for you to adopt Daisy. And we really wanted to know about your experience with that. Maybe starting with, could you tell us about when you and Steve decided you wanted to have a kid? And as a same-sex couple, that your options are a little limited there. What made you decide to go to the foster care route?
It's so funny because, talking about child-free existence, for the first 5 or 6 years that you and I were together, we did not want a kid. We were very we loved that we both didn't want kids. And, over time, I think we learned later that we started both sort of questioning that in our own minds. And then, there was this, I write about it in my book. There's this very dramatic moment when we were on vacation in Barcelona, and we had saved, so much money. We had saved all year to go on this trip, and we were on this trip, and the whole thing was falling apart before our eyes. I lost my wallet, and nobody would help us, and we didn't have we only had a little bit of cash with us, and my wallet had all of our credit cards in it. It was just not going well, and there's this moment where we were in this little sandwich shop across the street from our hotel. And we were stressed out and we were eating, and we got up to leave, and I waved goodbye to the guy that had made our sandwich and walked face first into what I thought was an open door, but it was a closed glass door, and it shattered all around me. And I wasn't hurt. I was humiliated, but it was just the punctuating moment on this trip that had gone horribly wrong. We went outside and we sat down on a bench, and I'm sobbing because I'm so embarrassed. And I'm I don't know what to do. And it just came out. I was I want a kid. I want a baby. And that was the moment of the release of letting it all out. Steve was oh my God, I do too. that was really the moment. And we really talked a bit about the options. At the time, we had gay friends who were going through surrogacy, which didn't seem like the right thing for us for a number of reasons. Number one, we couldn't afford it. It was like, they were saying like 130 grand to like 100, whatever. It was way out of our price range. But also, we didn't feel like we needed to create a life. We were like, the universe has said you may love each other, but you may not create a child together. So we're like, like, why don't we figure out another way? And traditional adoption was interesting to us, but we also kind of knew that there would always be parents, like prospective parents, wanting to go that route. So those kids in that way of coming into the world weren't lacking for parents to adopt them. And foster care really was kind of a calling to us. We live in New York City. We take public transportation. At the time, there was a big campaign looking for new foster parents, and I was seeing it all the time. And it just really seemed like we didn't know much about it. And we were like, let's at least investigate this. There was a big foster to adopt, sort of campaign happening. And that was sort of how we decided to at least learn about the foster care system. And then when we did, we were kind of like, I don't know, this feels... I say to Daisy, who's our daughter, she's 10 now, I say to her all the time whenever we talk about her story that we were like meant to be together, And so whatever it was, the universe was like, this is how you're going to find Daisy, like foster care ended up being that way. And so I feel like we were pulled in that direction because we were meant to be Daisy's parents, and she was sort of coming into the world through the foster care system. So I think that we were sort of brought together that way.
Well, and after it smacked you in the face, literally, that you wanted a child, so you come home and you see this campaign. And so what was your next step? Like, where did you go after that?
Yeah, so the way that it works, at least in New York, was if you want to pursue foster care, and I should say most people who become foster parents are not looking for an adoptive situation. But at the time they were talking about foster care and like foster to adopt. And we were kind of like, what do we do? So we learned that once a month or so, all of the foster care agencies in the city will hold like an orientation. So it's a chance for prospective foster parents to come and learn about all of the different agencies. And you would think it's kind of like a foster care agency is a foster care agency, but actually no, like different foster care agencies specialize in different things. Some are dealing with primarily babies, some are dealing with primarily teenagers, or a lot of it is like specific to the part of the city that you live in. And they each sort of get up and give like a small presentation about who they are and what they do. And then afterwards, you can kind of go to the ones that kind of spoke to your interests. And so there were only two that spoke really about having infants come into their agency. And those were the two that we went and spoke to. And then of those two, there was one that we really connected with the woman who was there speaking on behalf of the agency. And so we were kind of like, all right, I guess this is our agency.
That's amazing. So what was it like when you jumped into training? Like, what did you learn there?
So yeah, that's the next step. Once you pick your agency, then the agency puts you through what's called MAP training. I can no longer remember what MAP stands for, but it's basically, this is how naive I was and how little I knew. I thought that because we were really interested in having a baby, and a baby that had a high likelihood of being, cleared for adoption, I assumed the classes were going to be like parenting classes. Like, this is how you change a diaper. This is how you feed a baby. This is how you make a bottle. It was not until we sat down for our first class, it's a 10-week program, that I was like, oh no, that's not what this is at all. This is much more for parents, for people coming into the system that really are looking to be more traditional foster parents, which is, a human being is placed in your care for a certain amount of time. And most often I think they place like teenagers, or adolescence. It's not usually a baby the way that, what Steve and I were looking for. So these classes were much more about like conflict resolution and de-escalation and, dealing with kids that are coming into your care that have experienced trauma and understanding trauma responses. And that it was So to me, I was like, okay, this is obviously very valuable, but when are they going to teach me how to change a diaper? I feel like I really need to know that. And that day never came. I had to learn that all on my own. So, that was the training. The training didn't really apply to us because we were very clear that we were looking for an infant. But some of it was very beneficial, like, learning how to communicate with the birth parents, which we did a little bit in the beginning, and, and that sort of thing. I will say the woman who taught our MAP classes, it's a 10-week course, was the same woman who we had connected with at the orientation. And she was amazing. And honestly, we really bonded with our class. It was all different people from all walks of life, all coming to foster care for for various reasons. And it was a really, really beautiful experience.
Oh, that's amazing. And like some of what you learned in those classes, I think really came through in you and Jillian just covered the curious case of Natalia Grace. And you came at that with such an empathetic perspective for where she had been and what she had gone through. And I thought and in some ways I'm imagining that has really informed your work professionally in talking about those situations.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody doesn't know about Natalia Grace, she's now a woman with dwarfism, but she was adopted when she was 5 by a family who horrendously mistreated her, and it was a terrible, terrible case. But it definitely, my my role as a foster parent and my sort of time in the foster care system, and now as an adoptive parent, definitely informs my work. And in the true crime space, it's very hard for me to cover cases that deal with kids and any sort of abuse towards children. It's terrible. And yeah, I mean, it's brutal stuff to have to deal with.
It's very heavy. And as you were sharing that story, although I had not heard it, and thank you for sharing, I felt heavy. You hear these stories every day in our work. And I think one of the things that you talked about, was the professionals that you met with. Like, one of the questions I had, it sounds like you had a really good bond. And is there anything they could have done better? Like, it sounds like you had a community. Is there anything that was lacking as you look back?
That's a really interesting question because, Steve and I were sort of brought into the foster care system with the idea that we were going to foster to adopt, and our early understanding was that there were children that were cleared for adoption that we would be matched with. That was not the case. And I really do think the communication on that front could have been much clearer, that, we didn't really fully understand until the end of our 10-week training that we were going to be placed with a baby that was being brought into the foster care system the way any kid would be brought into the foster care system. And you don't really know what's going to happen in terms of if that baby will be cleared for adoption or not. We came to understand that the role of foster care is always reunification with the parents, which of course, if that's appropriate, that's what everybody wants. We definitely felt a little bit, I don't know what the right word is, but we were like, we're looking at your posters on the subway that say foster to adopt. That's what we're here to do. And it was only many weeks later that they were like, well, that's only a possibility if X, Y, and Z. And so the communication on that front, I think, could have been stronger. The foster parents really don't have rights. So like, even as much as like, you can't get your foster child's haircut without the consent of the birth parents, or at least the sign off of the agency. You can't take them to an emergency room without getting the agency to agree to it. We had a situation one night where Daisy, we thought, was having an allergic reaction to something at like 3 a.m, and we could not take her to the emergency room until we got approval from the agency, which was very hard to get at 3 o'clock in the morning. So, and as a foster parent, you're thinking like, who cares? It's an emergency. I'm taking them to the emergency room. But we were very afraid that if we did something that was against the rules, we didn't know what the repercussions for that would be. Mm-hmm. So, I think that like one of the things that I used to talk about a lot when I was an active foster parent was having advocates for the foster parents within the agencies. And that was something that happens, on and off, but it comes down to money. Like there's, the foster care agencies, at least in New York, are severely underfunded. There isn't really money for that. But I think, as a foster parent, it would have been really nice to have had an advocate to be able to go to and say, like, these are my concerns, beyond our social worker, who was incredible, but she had a caseload that was just, crazy. Like foster care caseworkers are very overworked. So it's, it really just is a system where everyone's trying to do the right thing. Everyone's there for the right reasons. It is a bureaucracy like any other governmental, it's city, state agency. So there are challenges that are going to be there. But yeah, I would say those were the things that I think could have been improved.
I think I go back to the filing cabinet story. File this baby under M for Monday and throw some bottles in there before we leave.
Yeah.
Like, I have to say, that was like, I was literally hysterically laughing when I read that.
Well,
like,
folks who haven't had the chance to read your book, which I will just hold up here, Failure is Not an Option, How the Chubby Gay Son of a Jesus-Obsessed Lesbian Found Love, Family, and Podcast Success, and a bunch of other stuff. I love the title, by the way. You can almost say it all in one breath.
I was going to say, you had to take 3 breaths to get all of it. The publisher asked me for a subtitle. I'm like, I'll give you a subtitle, but it's going to be a banger.
Yeah, you got to have everything in there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But for folks who haven't had a chance to read this yet, could you tell a little bit about how you got Daisy?
Yeah, so you mean like specifically like when like the day that
the day you got the call?
Because Tiffany did say his story is an anomaly. We never wait 45 minutes for a placement. She goes, he is an anomaly. Like I went.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say too. I have friends who have an infant foster placement, and they got the call the morning of. They're like, by the way, you need to come to Cincinnati in the next whatever if you want this child.
Yep.
And so I didn't know if your experience was like that as well.
Yeah, it was very similar. So what happened was, we had been very clear throughout the process. We really wanted a baby that they thought would have a high likelihood to be eventually cleared for adoption. And Louisa, the woman who at the agency who was like our placement person, understood that really clearly. And so, we finished our training and got our license in March on a Thursday. And Steve had gone back to school, my husband, to get a second degree in math, and he wasn't going to be done with school until June. So though we got our license that Thursday in March, we were like, we want to hold until June when Steve is done with school. We turned in our paperwork to get our license that Thursday morning, and Thursday afternoon, we got a call. And they were like, we have a baby for you. And I got the call, and Steve was at school, and I was like, and I knew that if they were calling us with a placement, that it was probably a baby that would be, have a high likelihood to be cleared for adoption, which we'd also been made to understand was kind of unusual. So I was like, oh my God, it's happening. I'm calling Steve. He's not answering. I'm calling him. He's not answering. I'm at work. It's like 3:45. And they were like, listen, you don't have to say yes right this second, but we need to know by 5. We need to place this baby by 5. So I'm calling Steve. He's not answering. Finally, he calls me back and he's like, what is happening? And I'm like, there's a baby. It's happening now. And he's like, and Steve is not a person who likes to have to make decisions on the fly. He is a very thoughtful person. I am the not thoughtful person of us. I was all in. And he's like, what do we do? And he's like, what happens if we don't have an answer by 5? They don't place her by 5. What are they like? They all just go home for the night. So finally Steve says yes. And I call the agency back. They're like, go home, take a cab, do not take the subway, get there as fast as you can. We're going to get this baby to you by 5. And then 5 o'clock rolls around and there's no baby. And I call the agency and they're like, yeah, sorry, it was too late in the day. And I was like, well, what are you doing with her tonight? And so they're like, we're going to play, the baby will be delivered first thing tomorrow. So we wake up on Friday, the baby doesn't come. And all day we're like, we didn't know what was going to happen. And by the end of the day, Friday, they're like, yeah, she needs to stay in the hospital over the weekend. So now we've got the whole weekend and it was all feeling very much like it wasn't going to happen. I was a wreck all weekend. I was in bed. I'm like, this baby's not coming. They changed their minds. Oh my God. And then Monday morning, Steve gets up to go to school. And I was just lying in my bed, sad. And I heard a car pull up outside of our front of our apartment. And I looked out the window and it was a blue minivan. And I was like, oh my God, oh my God. And they open the door to the minivan and they take a baby out of a carrier. No one had called us to say the baby was coming. They take the baby out of the carrier, and I had the presence of mind to snap a quick picture, which we have and we put up every year. And then a case manager I'd never met before just knocks on the door and basically hands me a baby. And Daisy loves to tell this story. She's like, Daddy, so then what happened? And I was like, she's like, the lady handed me to you in a carrier, right? And I was like, yeah. And what else did she hand you? She handed me like a bag of formula that I had to, it was like pre-made formula that I had to like put together. And you didn't know how to do it, did you? And I was like, I didn't know. And she's like, and you were scared, huh? And I was like, yeah. And so you called other daddy, didn't you? And I was like, I did. And you told me I had to come home from school right now, didn't you? She loves to tell this part of the story. And that was how we got the baby.
Oh, I'm
Like a
tearing
pizza.
up a
I
little
know,
bit.
me too.
I know.
I'm so glad you have that picture, and thank you. You shared it at your show down in Columbus, and it was so powerful to see. Maybe we'll get a copy to share, but I do think that, you know, when you think about that story, like how perfect. Like I have a Steve at home. His name is Jonathan. He doesn't want kids, and hopefully when he hears this, it'll change his mind. I'm looking at the two people who can help me leverage that relationship, but. I always
team, Matthew.
Well, and I always wanted a kid, and so, but the scariness, because going through the adoption process, at one point, it scares you because they don't teach you how to do the basic things.
Well, here's the secret. They don't teach us biological parents either. They
Oh.
just
No.
send you home from the hospital.
I was going to interrupt Patrick and say, you're probably actually more lucky that you got the de-escalation tactics and all those sorts of things, because you can figure out the diapers in the milk pretty easily.
Yeah.
And you got 10 weeks. We got like 3 days, and they're like, all right, you're qualified to have children now, I guess.
I know. Like anybody can have a kid, but you need like a license to shampoo dogs in New York City.
Right? Oh my gosh, that's so
You
true.
know?
Story.
Yeah, it really is like, you know, it was such a wild time. It's funny how it just happens. Like you're just, then all of a sudden you're parents, you know?
So what were those first few days like? How did you get the stuff? You had like 5 seconds to get a whole baby's worth of stuff.
Yeah, nobody threw you a party like they throw
Yeah,
all
you
the
didn't get a
biological
baby
parents.
shower.
No, we didn't get the baby shower, and we didn't know what gender baby we were going to get. And, you know, we were very lucky. We had a friend that put a message up on Facebook and was like, my friend and his husband just got a baby and they need everything. We had a crib because they won't give you the baby unless you have a crib and a car seat. And our friend kind of just drove around and collected clothes and, you know, food and diapers and you know, like I remember like learning to swaddle the baby is like such a big thing, and you have to swaddle them so tight that it feels like you're completely suffocating them, and that was terrifying. And you know, I remember those. I took, I think, 6 weeks off work, and Steve was in school, so he didn't have any time off. So I was like the full-time dad for the first 6 weeks. And it was exhausting and it was amazing. And, you know, you're foster parents. And so you can't really post any pictures of the kid on social media. And, you know, you also like, you know, it just was, I just remember all of our families coming to visit, but also the uncertainty that this was actually going to work out. And that because very early on, right from the beginning, you know, Daisy had visitation with her birth parents at the agency, an hour a week or 2 hours a week. And so we're taking this like 1 week old baby on the subway to like take her down for visitation with her birth parents. And, you know, people have a lot of advice when they see other people on the subway with a baby at any age. So it's, you know, navigating that. And so, yeah, I mean, it was an absolute whirlwind and we barely slept and it was amazing.
That's so incredible. So how long did the uncertainty last for you? When did you know she was going to be a permanent member of your family?
We sort of knew, we had a pretty good indication after several months. But the way foster care works is that the birth parents, and rightfully so, are given opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to sort of do the things that they need to do to get the kids back. And Daisy had an older sister who had already been freed for adoption. She had another older sister that was going through the process at the same time as us. So she had an 18-month-old sister at the time. So we were actually doing visitation with the sister at the agency with the birth parents. So it was, you know, it was just a lot. So it was around the year mark that the social workers felt pretty confident in saying that they were pretty confident that this was going to happen. But the actual adoption didn't happen until Daisy was 2.5.
Wow. How did you
Yeah.
feel in that meantime?
There were days that were really scary. There were days that Daisy only ever had a handful of visitation with her birth parents because they eventually stopped coming. But there was always the chance that a grandparent was going to come out of the woodwork, or, it was really, looking back on it now, it was, I remember saying to my sister early on, if this is meant to be, it will be, and I kind of was able to live in that place where if this was meant to be, it will be. And, there were just days, there were days that Steve and I were just kind of we don't know what's going to happen. And then, and then we were 2 years in, and we were so close with our agency and all of the caseworkers and the lawyers that were working on it that we would forget. We'd be oh, it's Christmas and we're going to go see my family in Massachusetts. And we forgot to technically get permission from the agency. And we're oh God, we just kidnapped our own kid, crossing state lines or whatever. So, it was a challenge, but it was, once we were pretty clear that it was going to happen, it was, just a waiting game.
And what was the adoption day like?
It was pretty amazing. It was the adoption day. Oh God, now I'm going to cry. So we, the big surprise of the adoption day was Daisy's birth mother came and it was basically what was going to happen was it was the day that her rights were officially going to be these are two separate days. The birth parents' rights were officially terminated, and that was a day that we thought was going to just be a regular proceeding. We hadn't seen the birth parents in over a year, and but the birth mother came, and that was really scary because we didn't know, and the judge had a reputation of really wanting to make sure that the birth parents knew what they were doing. And again, that is a thing that should happen. And so when it became clear that essentially she was there to say to the judge, I will willingly give up my rights as long, God, I haven't told this story in a long time, as long as Daisy will go with Patrick and Steve. And it was just a formality. It wouldn't have mattered at that point, but it was a thing that it seemed really important to her to be able to someday maybe say to Daisy or have that be part of the story. And that was a really beautiful moment. But then adoption day was just amazing. It was absolutely, it was maybe a couple weeks later, and it was just beautiful. It was it was a celebration. All of the social workers that we had worked with and all of the attorneys that we had worked with and our family, just everybody was there, and Daisy's older sisters, Daisy's older sister, the oldest of the kids, had been fully adopted by that point, and her adoptive parents and her came, and that was really amazing. And it was just a celebration, it was just an absolute celebration. It was really nice.
That is so. Thank you for making us cry.
I know.
I know.
So, is there still that family bond? Does she still get to see her older sister?
So get this, not only does she see her all the time, they now go to school together.
No way.
Yeah.
That is so powerful.
Yeah, it's amazing because both of the birth parents lived in Manhattan, the children who were removed were always going to be placed with a family in Manhattan. So it's not like they could have placed her anywhere in the world and it just happened to be. They were, there was that. But it was actually the social worker for the attorney that was handling the adoption who had done it for that family as well. And they that woman, that social worker connected us. And we met and we all hit it off right away. And so Daisy's been spending time with her older sister since Daisy was not even a year. And so, Daisy ultimately in the last couple of years, when we decided to put Daisy into a private school because she's dyslexic, and we put her in a private school for dyslexic kids, her sister's parents decided that their daughter needed that too, and was like, let's just put them in the same school. And so that's what we do. So they see each other every day. This summer they're going to the same summer camp, so they're going to get to spend a lot of the summer together too. It's really amazing. It really, and like her older sister is 3 years older than her, and she's like cool now because Daisy's 10, so her older sister's like almost 14, and she's got like cool older friends, and so that makes Daisy feel really cool at school when the older kids want to hang out with Daisy. It's very, very, very nice.
Look at this magical community you've created. Like,
yeah,
just by, walking into a glass door.
Yeah, I know. Almost dying in Barcelona. Right. No, I know. And that's what it is one of those things for me that feels very much like all of it was meant to be.
The work we do with Dr. Perry just talks about community and family. And it sounds like Daisy has that so much. So I think she's going to, from the outside looking in, just hearing the story, I think she's going to have that community that we all need. It takes a village and we're actually finishing up our interview with Dr. Perry this afternoon. And it just really touches the heart because I do think that she is, she's surrounded by people and connected that just is so important, especially for kids that come through adoption because they struggle a lot and, they have, those moments. And so it sounds like you're navigating those really well.
Thank you. Yeah, it's, Daisy's very lucky. I grew up with no family. So it was my mom, single mother of 4. My mom was an only child and her parents died when we were very young. So we didn't have any extended family. And Daisy has extended family on both sides. She's got a ton of cousins. And, Steve's parents are very active. They're very active grandparents. So Daisy in the summer, she'll go down and spend 5 days with them by herself. And she loves it. And it's so wonderful. And she's got a lot of friends and, we live in New York. So it's in New York City. So she's surrounded by a lot of really artistic people. And I'm very jealous of Daisy's childhood.
I'm very jealous of Daisy's childhood. It sounds awesome.
I know.
Do you think you accidentally kidnapped her because you were once almost kidnapped?
Oh my God. That story of my father's like the laziest kidnapping of all time, where he like tricked us into coming with him for the weekend and then said he wasn't bringing us back. And my older sister was like, yeah, you are. And rolled down the window on the highway and started screaming like, I'm being kidnapped. And my dad brought us home within 45 minutes. It was wild.
I don't know how you managed to write a story about your own kidnapping that had me just in tears left laughter.
I was with your sister hanging out the window talking to the woman in the car next door.
Yeah, and that poor lady on the highway being like, what's going on in that car up there?
I feel like your sister was just like, you're kidnapping us? Watch this.
Hold my beer, my 13-year-old sister said.
That's amazing. So how do you think you had, a really interesting childhood with, a father who was kind of in and out and a mom who seemed like a very dedicated parent. How has that shaped your parenting?
That's so interesting. That's a good question. I grew up with like I was saying, my mom was a single mother of 4. She worked full time. We were very poor. But my mom loved her work. My mom was a social worker, and my mom's a lesbian. And in the 90s, her job was finding housing for people living with HIV and AIDS who were being legally discriminated against. So my mom worked for a company called Housing Assistance Corporation, and that was what they did, and so I really got my work ethic from my mom. I'm a worker and my mom was a worker, but my mom wasn't around to be much of a authoritarian or put in a lot of boundaries or a lot of rules. And we were kind of feral children, like I was saying to somebody the other day, like, oh, what?
Oh no, I was.
Oh no, we were just laughing. We were actually just talking about this the other day about how like the way we grew up are like people would call social services today.
Oh, totally. 100%. Like, we really were those kids that would go outside to play and not come home until it was dark. And if we didn't come home, my mom would just probably assume that we slept over at a friend's house. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, just feral children who came in for food.
If they're not back in 4 days, I'll start asking around.
Exactly. And then I wrote in the book, I'm like, I was beginning to think my mom hoped one of us got kidnapped because, more food for everybody else. But I'm definitely the pushover of me and Steve. There was this amazing story. I was working the book fair at Daisy's school last week, and one of the other moms said that last year, Daisy at the book fair, neither Steve or I could make it. So we had given Daisy some, $20 or whatever. But Daisy had picked out like 10 books that would cost way more money than she had the money for. And this parent said, I said to Daisy, like, oh, I'm going to have to like call your dads and just like find out if this is okay. And Daisy goes, which dad? and the parent goes, well, I think we'll call Daddy Steve. And Daisy goes, I'd prefer it if you called Daddy Patrick, because I'm the one that's definitely going to be like, yeah, whatever she wants, whatever she like. I'm such a pushover, but I am very much trying to incorporate like structure into Daisy's life, and I'm trying to like incorporate like saying no from time to time, and so I am a product of my mother's parenting, but I'm also very lucky to have a co-parent who, is a good sort of not authoritarian in a mean way. He's not like a yeller or anything, but he is much less concerned about Daisy liking him than I am. And Daisy loves him very much, but like, I'm a little bit of a pushover.
And we know how to leverage our parents.
Oh, yeah, we do.
Yes, she knew which one would give her the result that she wanted. So I'm proud of her.
Yes, exactly. I'd prefer that you call Daddy Patrick. Like, it's so funny.
I don't know if he's been cancel cultured yet, but she's like a little Dale Carnegie. She's like winning friends and influencing people.
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly.
I love that.
Well, and I know at least in the TCO fandom, she's already a little influencer. Like everyone kind of wants to know what Daisy thinks about things. So
Daisy, whenever we do live shows, she will bring, if she comes to them, she'll bring construction paper and fold them into fans, like actual fans to fan yourself, and then sell them for $1.
Genius.
And I'm
Incredible.
like, people give her like 20s because like nobody has $1, and Daisy would be like, I don't have any change. And I'm like, I came out on stage once. I was like, stop giving her 20. We are not donating this to the United Way. She's keeping the money.
Oh my gosh, that is hilarious.
Start herself a little investment account. Man, what an
Honestly.
entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Honestly.
So Patrick, before we let you go, if you were to kind of talk to families who are considering fostering right now or fostering to adopt, what would you say to them?
We had a very beautiful experience in the foster care system. It worked out for us beautifully. I would encourage anybody who has a calling to be a foster parent to go and do it. The need is so great, but I would say, I think the best thing that we did for ourselves was being very clear about what we were looking for out of the experience. And that really served us. And I would just say, like, ask a lot of questions, make your needs known, know that it's there are good days, there are bad days, but like it is such a beautiful community to be a part of. And if you feel the calling to do it, I cannot recommend it highly enough.
Thank you for being such, like, through your work in TCO, through your book, such an advocate for foster care, and such a, you're so honest about your experience. And I think that really tells people as much as going to one of the orientations. And it probably matters more because you went through it. And
yeah. Well, thanks. I always wanted to be honest about everything, but especially in that experience, in the foster care experience, it was a 90% positive experience, and there's just a desperate need for foster parents everywhere. So, I can't encourage it enough.
Well, thank you, because there are 13,000 kids in the state of Ohio that need foster homes right now, and there are only 7,500 licensed homes in the state of Ohio. So we have we have 4 residential treatment facilities at our organization, and we have a waiting list for kids to come into it. So
wow.
Yeah.
I pray for all involved. It's rough. It's really rough. That makes me very sad.
But the hopeful thing is, like, what you're doing matters.
Yes.
Like, your voice out there, like, through your book, through like your constant advocacy on your podcast, people hear that. Every time you say something about it, someone's listening and says, I've thought about foster care, and Patrick did it, and it makes a difference.
And so an important thing to say is that, like, most most foster parents aren't looking for what we were looking for. The commitment doesn't have to be to that level. You can take a kid, you can take multiple kids. You can also, like turn your home on and off as long as you keep your licenses current. And something they don't tell you that they should tell you is they give you money. So like you're not paying, I mean, at least in New York State, there is a stipend you get every month to pay for the needs and expenses of the kids. And in New York State, like you're not paying medical expenses either. Like that stuff is covered. And so like, nobody should be going into foster. It's not a for-profit thing. You shouldn't be doing it looking to make money. But if money is a barrier because you're afraid you're going to have 2 or 1 more mouths to feed, there is money to cover that stuff that is given to you.
Absolutely. And we have a very similar system here in Ohio. People get stipends and all the support that hopefully they need to care for kids.
And with babies, we were given, we got WIC in the beginning, so we didn't have to pay for the very expensive formula. Like that stuff is covered. So if that's what's holding you back, investigate in your area and get answers to that.
And a very personal question, because you were probably a desirable home for placements, did they try to keep your case open and give you other placements? Did you guys ever consider
yes.
that?
Yeah, they definitely did. And we were very clear. We were kind of like one and done. Okay. We wanted to give Daisy the best life we possibly could. And we felt that we were a 1-kid family. But we were ambassadors. I mean, we would come and give talks. We would come and do Q&As. We were really invested in the system while we were in it. So we were trying to give back as much as we could.
That is awesome. And I'm just so happy to hear that you guys had a positive experience. I know that historically speaking, the LGBTQ community has been excluded from foster care and excluded from adoption. I think the tides have changed on that. I hope they continue to move in that direction, because homes like yours and Steve are so valuable. Like, you change Daisy's lives, your advocacy will change more lives. And I'd like to see more of that.
In New York, when we were going through the system, you could only become a licensed foster parent if you signed a paper saying that you were going to be an LGBTQIA plus affirming home. So in New York State, they've taken it to that level. And that is a major need in New York State, is the number of homeless LGBTQ teenagers is through the roof. So there's a great need for that here.
Oh, I love that. I love that for Ohio, or for New York. I was going to say, hopefully Ohio will follow. We've got some work to do here, but yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. This has just been, I feel like we could talk all day.
I know. I really could talk to you all day. I could go into like the nuances of like my favorite episodes. Like,
yeah. Well, that's going to need an offline.
Yeah. No, this was amazing. I haven't had the chance to talk about this stuff in a really long time. So thank you for, letting me come and share my experience.
Oh, no, thank you so much. And
maybe
again,
we could get Patrick to come to Ohio to do an advocacy talk.
Oh, maybe you could. Yes.
I would be more than happy to. If you all would have me, I would be there in a heartbeat.
Oh my gosh, we would love it. We have offices in Columbus. Next time you come do a show.
All right, well, we're all coming.
I guess we're all going to have to get
the same age as their
drinks
kids.
And
coming to Ohio.
Oh yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah, bring the whole family. We'd love to have you.
You have a 10-year-old?
Well, no, I have a 5-year-old.
I have a 4 and an 8-month-old.
I don't know aging.
He doesn't have kids. Anyone under the age of 10 to him is all the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes we volunteer for the art program, and somebody will be like, "How old was that kid?" We'll be like, "That was 11," and I'll be like, "He looked 5."
It's okay. You'll learn.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, this is so fun, you guys. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Patrick.
Have a wonderful rest of your day.
All right. Take it easy.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.